Not used to it, I guess, but it's like, okay.
3 minutes.
And you have to start as Mary.
Oh, well.
I'm surprised that I didn't notice him before.
So what's with
What?
guys? I mean, I know it's but it's just incredibly unfair.
Oh, and that means, oh, sorry.
So, well, that's what I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
because,
Well, because we call it character.
well, that's true too.
Ready on the right? Ready on the left?
Okay,
Ready on the firing line?
We're ready. We're just, women talking.
It's 9:07, Friday, March the 16th, 2018. The Behavior Analysis Advisory Board meeting is called to order. We'll call roll. Let's see, Dr. Wes Dotson.
Present.
Ellen Cato.
Present.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski.
Present.
Sarika Cuellar. Dr. Joyce Mock.
Present.
Laurie Schneider. Carol Sloan.
Present.
Byron Russell. Five members being present, we have a quorum. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of December 13, 2017. Their board members will have received the minutes, excuse me, proposed minutes in their packet. Have it on the laptop in front of you. Any comments, changes, reviews, revisions, recommendations? Yes.
I move we
Sokolowski.
approve.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by, oh, God, that's too many. Now, sorry, which one said it first? Okay. I was looking toward Carol, so but you get the next one. Second by Ellen. I'm sorry, Ellen Cato. All in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are from the December 13 meeting, 2017, are approved. The next item on the agenda is public comment. We have received notice of, pardon me, one person wishing to make public comment, Aisha Altahif, and if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. But I'm sorry.
It's Aisha, but you got the last one, right?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, please proceed. You can stand there, come up here, wherever you want to go. How about here? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aisha Aldeef. I am a board-certified behavior analyst, and I've been practicing in the Austin area for about 6 years now within the field of autism. I've worked at the State Supported Living Center, I've worked in little private clinics, and I've worked in the community and in homes of families. I'm here on behalf of Behavior Frontiers, which is an ABA therapy provider. And we just like to recommend to the board to include alternative certifying boards to the licensure wording currently. As it's written, the BACB is the only one that is being acknowledged by the licensing board, and there are several other additional certifying qualified behavior analyst licensing boards available to providers and consumers out there. The reason why we are suggesting this is that currently, as the way the TLDR wording is, it does limit choice for providers and families in the state of Texas. So we're actually suggesting that you include the QABA certifying board and the BICC certifying board. We submitted comment to TDLR on March 2nd, and I do have a copy of that letter if you guys would like it, a physical copy.
I think we have it in our
Okay,
packet.
fantastic.
Thank you, though.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
your taking time and trouble to come, express your interest and concerns, and we'll certainly take those comments into consideration.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And I apologize for mispronouncing your name. That, unless there's been something else received, that's a public comment. Again, thank you so much for coming and expressing your concerns and interests. All right, let's move on to the next item of the agenda, staff reports, and we're scheduled to hear first from the licensing division.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
My name is Laura Hernandez. I'm a licensing manager for Behavioral Analyst program. Our agency had a recalibration of the agency, which moved some programs to different teams. The Behavior Analyst program was moved from the health program team to my team as of March 1st. So my team will be taking over licensing for the Behavior Analyst. We have met with bill implementation teams already. We've created forms that will be available online and by paper. Currently, the forms are being revised to show the reduction in fees for the behavior analyst from $330 to $110, and for the assistant behavior analyst assistant from $330 to $110. So those are being revised before we can get them out to our systems team to work on getting those online and by paper. So the licensing form is going to be very easy, simple to fill out. When it gets to our licensing team, basically all we have to do is verify the certification, and then we can issue the license as long as everything else is met on the form. That's all I have for you today. I don't know if you have any questions for me. It's new to me, so I've kind of been reading everything and catching up quick.
Well, I have a question. Could you tell us again, so we moved from which team to which team again?
It's still all in the licensing division,
Right.
but we had a health professions team, and it's moved over to my team, which is currently called the tools team.
Tools?
Tools, TOOLS, and we handle, in the calibration, we also receive the podiatry program, the behavior analyst. My team also handles the towing, service contract providers, and professional employer organizations. So we have a plethora of teams now.
What was the third team that you mentioned, Tony?
Towing, no, our program.
Towing.
That's one of our programs that
okay.
we also license on our team as a towing program.
Dr. Borland, if I could, Carla James, TDLR.
Please, Carla.
We did a slight calibration in the agency to accommodate for the programs that have been coming over in an effort to ensure that our streamlining is still working. We're getting licenses out in a timely manner, and in preparation just for whatever comes down the pipe next time. And so I want to provide you with some comfort that our licensing teams are quite capable of doing anything they need to, and the cross-training occurs on a daily basis as necessary. So I just want to make sure that there's no concern on part of the board that we have moved this program to another team. It is a large division that works well together, and this is an effort to, as I said, ensure the streamlining continues, prepare for the future, and do a lot of cross-training. We want to make sure that we have got multiple people in that division that can pick up and do anything that needs to happen, so there is no slowdown.
So the table of organization that's in the packet does not reflect that change, is that
I
correct?
do not have the packet. Let me see if...
Ellen Cato, that's,
Okay, I'm told by our licensing director that our calibration happened on March 1st, and you all, the packet provided to you happened prior to that. So we'll be happy to provide you with an update to that organizational chart.
That would be great. I've just got to admit, I thought that the company of professions where we were seemed to be a more natural fit in terms of human service professionals. So I've got to admit, I'm sorry, and that was something I was very pleased to be able to tell my colleagues that were in with other, human service professions.
Dr. Borland, Mary,
And so I'm trying to understand this a little better. I'm not disagreeing, and I appreciate, and certainly the prime interest is being able to move things efficiently and effectively. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Dr. Boyle and Mary Winston, this is also about licensing software. We have different softwares that, and we're always looking for a better way to incorporate. It's not so much the different programs or professions, but what comes in, you all are a new license, but several of them come in on, that we're graced with from the legislature, come in on a software that our team has to acquire, has to learn, and we would love to streamline that process to get everyone on one software, because this requires our licensing team to kind of have to jump all over the map. So this is really what part of this calibration is about. You are with podiatrists, yes, an honorable profession. I think I need to
Yes.
go back and see mine this week. But
Sure.
it's not about, being a podiatrist / behavior analyst. Doesn't exist, I don't think. Could exist, but I don't know of any. But it is about aligning the software for the team to be able to manage until we can get us all into, hopefully, one. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's what we're pushing for.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr.
go
Borland,
ahead.
Carla James, TDLR. To be real clear about this is just our licensing division. The folks in our regulatory program management division, which was called compliance before, Katie's remaining where she's at, and Katie's your primary contact. So Katie's not moving anywhere. She remains your key contact for that program. And also, too, our customer service division is not changing. So the behavior analysts that are calling in for assistance from the agency will hear the same voices they've been hearing before. So the change that Laura's talking about was a minor shift that happened in licensing, and I don't want to cause any alarm on your part, because and I don't want to diminish this by saying that's just licensing, but that's one component of our agency that made a slight shift. The remainder of what you're accustomed to did not change.
Thank you for that clarification. I guess I was, that helps. However, I'm still wondering, and I guess this is reflecting my ignorance of the licensure process still, particularly for other professions, but are the activities that have to be done for licensure for behavior analysts and any decision-making similar to those for other, some of the other professions? In other words, are the team, and I don't mean to, hope I'm not offending you, but the people on your team, are they used to dealing with the kinds of issues for licensure that behavior analysts will bring to the table?
Well,
And I'm not sure what those issues would be.
yeah, and currently, and we don't really know since we haven't actually started the licensing process yet. So once we get, and that's why we're, all the licensing division, regulatory program, we're all meeting for bill implementation team. So we meet periodically so that we're all on the same page and we all understand the different kinds of certification. And for the licensing process, we, for any of our programs, our teams can handle, we cross-train across the board. So even if we're just doing towing, we have people that can help with electricians. We have some that help with the massage therapy program. And as we're learning, we're all, as Carla said, we're all cross-training. And for every different program that we come, we ensure that we know the licensing process and how to get those licenses out quickly.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, Dee Dee McKeisha, I'm the Director of Licensing. Rest assured that the only thing you have to have this license is the BACB certification. That's it. We don't have to look at any other qualifications for a behavior analyst license. So while lots of Laura's team have very involved licensing
I'm sure.
requirements, this one is one of the more simple ones because it was set up that way from the beginning to make it, to let us use those certifications. So yeah, it should be fairly simple from us. And one of the major reasons this was also moved was to get you licensed faster.
And we appreciate that.
So yeah, the health professions team that you were on was overwhelmed with the number of licensees that we had coming in, and their processing time was slowing down. So Laura's team had some extra capacity. We moved the program over there to help adjust for that and get the licenses issued faster.
And certainly we want that to go because we know that is that in my ears or is that?
No, it's everybody.
Okay.
Do you want to try mine?
No.
Let's see if mine's better.
Maybe I need to move it back.
Dr. Boyle and Mary Winston again.
Yes, ma'am.
As our deputy director was saying, you are still part of the same group with another calibration. We've renamed compliance to regulatory program management. So you still are in the health professions group there.
Okay.
Again, the licensing, you guys are easy to license, i.e. to issue a license. What we do is issue licenses. You do the heavy lifting, get us the information, we issue licenses. Your license is easy for our staff to issue. So if your license is easy to issue, why would we bog you down with someone who's on a system that's much harder to get that deliverable, right? So that's why this has occurred. We didn't want to stunt what we had. You had a good thing going with you, and we want to keep it with getting the licenses issued. So only in licensing has this moved to a team that can just effectuate issuing that license. That's it.
Okay. All right. So just to make sure I understand. So if someone calls in saying they want to know about what do I have to do to get a license, who fields that call?
Customer service will.
Okay. The licensing department does it. Customer service
That's
does. So if
right.
they want to know, do I have to take another test, which is questions that people are asking.
Absolutely.
That goes to customer service.
That's right.
So you guys, from our point, then for our profession, you guys are mostly making sure that verifying, or distributing and receiving the applications, verifying certification, ensuring the background check is satisfactory, and then issue the license.
You got it.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
So there's not a lot of decision-making to be made
That's
there.
precisely, yes.
Okay.
For this
That would
license, it's
handled
not
by
what
other
we do.
teams.
Right.
Now, Mary Winston
Thank you.
again, customer service director's here, and we'll be up, and you can drill him in just
Oh.
a few minutes.
Look forward to it.
He's ready for it. He's ready.
Thank you, Mary. I feel authorized now. Any other questions from the board?
Could I make a comment? This is Stephanie Sokolowski. I would just like you to know that we all have the same concern that Dr. Borland expressed. As soon as you said it, I thought, okay, this is when it starts. I knew it was going to fall apart. So he's not the only one, but thank you so much for your explanation. That
Yes.
helps a lot, and it helps me to understand. Thank you.
And we can always go back, Mary Winston again, and have any conversations, and during the next meeting, just because it's not on the agenda. I was trying to think of a way we could do it, but we can't. It's not on the agenda. It wasn't noticed. So we can always go back, and once it's noticed, and have a discussion, just an in-depth discussion of where you are. And frankly, you're in the same place. But we don't want to bog down an easy license to issue. Just process, I should say.
Yeah.
So our process of issuing that license, we wanted you to be with a team that made it simplest for you, for us to process and get you licensed quickly. You're still in the same. You still have Katie. We haven't, the last meeting I said we need to clone her. We haven't cloned her yet. We haven't been able to. When that technology gets here, I think she's going to be the first one up. But you, at least for TDLR, you still have the same services. Again, you all can drill Trey. He's ready for you to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Or whoever you want to talk to. This is just, how does this information come in? How does the documentation come in? How can we easily process that? We have different software systems that we have been blessed with, that we have to work with and maneuver and make it work, you know, for our teams and for our employees and for our licensees particularly, to make it smooth. So we are always kind of that duck in the water, moving smoothly along. Under the water, it's like, and so this is one of the things that had we not told you, you wouldn't have even known.
We would have found out.
Oh, yes, we would.
And you would have loved it because you would have said, wow, how innovative. They put us with people to process licenses easier, and it went off without a glitch. So,
I would, this is Dr. Mock. I doubt that that's what we would have said, because I think that the concern is this is a highly skilled profession requiring a lot of education and we're in with towing, and that does not sit well.
No, you're not in with towing, and we may need to get just a chart, a copy made for you of the calibration to show you you're not in with towing. Your documentation comes in with a team that processes towing as well. But we also process a lot of different things. But no, you're not in with towing. I'm going to get you a copy of where you are.
Dr. Marc, Carla James, TDLR. I want to try to assure you all that hearing behavior analyst and towing together it's simply a process. The decision was made because this is a new license and so many steps happen before we even get the paper from your profession that for licensing, it's get that piece of paper out the door quickly so that they can start practicing. As far as the expertise and knowledge of the requirements of a behavior analyst and the need for us to be able to answer questions, not only from the general populace, but from the behavior analyst profession, remains the same. That's Katie. And that is still in the health professions area of the agency. That has not been removed. And in addition to that, the customer service remains the same. Same folks answering the same questions as before. So I think we're all saying the same thing, but it's sounding a little bit confusing, and that is that the humans verifying the information that has already been checked and double-checked because of the process for behavior analysts. And I don't want to diminish what the licensing area does because they do a very important job and they work very hard at it. But they don't have to be the expertise to process the paper. Katie and the area that she works in has to be the expertise on this. And they are the subject matter experts that assist the licensing division if those questions come up.
For your license type, the BACB does the heavy lifting.
Okay.
That's who is making sure all the credentials are met. Because of that certification being required in place to apply for a license, that's where the work happens. And that's one of the reasons we were able to reduce your fees, because we don't have to do all that work up front.
Gotcha.
Someone else is doing it.
Great.
No, I don't know if that helps at all, Dr. Mock, but the reality is very little has changed. And I feel very confident that the folks asking to be licensed and people calling in are not going to notice a difference.
And that's good news. I think it's just kind of the way it will be, maybe perceived. The thing is, we're really, but what I hear is this change only reflects the licensing mechanism, the group doing, right?
That's right. It's
And-
who is processing that
Right.
application that came in online or on a piece of paper. That's all the difference there is. The same exact process happens across the board. We verify that each license application has the requirements laid out in the law for all the license types that we issue, no matter which team it is.
Right.
Yeah,
It
Carla
doesn't
James.
change any of the expectations.
No, not at
And
all.
That's one of the things that
Not
we
at all.
that
No,
people
not
be
at all.
clear on.
Not at all.
Right.
Carla James again, TDLR. I would say that unless someone is watching this or you tell them, there's a high probability they will never know that there was a difference because they weren't not calling and personally talking to the licensing group every day to know that, Sally was processing their license.
Gotcha.
So if I'm on the outside and I didn't see this on YouTube, I'm never going to know the difference.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
No.
Observations? No? Thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. And we promise we'll try to be good citizens and work with you.
We'll be nice.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll play nice. Next up, report from the Customer Service Division.
Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
Chair, good to see you again. My name is Tracy Seals, and I am the Director of the Customer Service Division, and I'll be giving a brief overview of the Customer Service Division and how we work. So, as the Director of the Division, we have as Mary mentioned, a duck on the water. So that is very appropriate description for our division as well. We have a team of 51 very passionate, hardworking individuals. They take calls for 39 programs that we regulate. What I can say as a follow-up from the previous conversation is that we do have a team that will be taking the calls for the Behavior Analyst program who will be specifically trained. We also use knowledge-based articles in our customer relationship management software to plug in those frequently asked questions so that our folks will have direct access to the information they need to answer any questions that are in our area of expertise. And for this program, as it was stated earlier, it's pretty simple. As long as you have your certification, we're going to say that's all we need. That proof of that number, the application, and the fee, and you'll be on your way. And so those, for us, we expect to be pretty easy calls. So if it gets into anything else about the certifying board or any other, we're going to direct them to Katie. So, and Katie and I and Antoine, the manager who's responsible for this program, we were all at the conference along with Dee Dee just this last weekend, and it was a wonderful time to be introduced to the industry and to get a chance to meet the folks that we'll be talking to over the phone and responding to emails from. So that was a pleasure. We take approximately 2,000 calls per day, and we took 500,000 calls in the last year. So just let that settle in for a second.
Excuse me, is that
Yes.
all, does that include emails or just
Yeah,
phone?
well, you're
Is that
correct.
contact?
Contacts. You're
Okay.
correct. Thank you for that correction. So we had over.
Mr. Francis made a point of that. in the
Yes, he did.
presentation.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he did a great presentation last weekend. We had over 500,000 contacts last year, and we do have multiple languages in our department because we have licensees who speak multiple languages in the industries that we oversee. Just a little bit about me. I've been with the agency since 2005, and I came over from the Cosmetology Commission, where I had worked for a few years in that industry. It was nerve-wracking. It was new. But when I met Brian, the first time I met him, as was evidenced in the presentation on last Saturday, he immediately, calmed my worries and the fears of the rest of the folks in that agency. And I knew that I wanted to work with this team. And it's been 13 years. I made the best choice of my career, actually. I started as a customer service representative at the Cosmetology Commission and moved into a supervisory role at the Department of Licensing and Regulation and am now the director. So it's been a great group. We work well together. We are cross-functionally trained. We communicate and do everything in a functionally aligned way so that we don't have silos. All I can say is that what Brian explained to the group and that they received so well last weekend, we will do our very best to follow through on his commitments. And those we wholeheartedly agree to. So for this particular industry, I don't really have any numbers to report. We have had, a few just general inquiry type calls, when is it starting? And we direct them to the website. So that's all I have. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Are these your data?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for providing us data.
Yes,
we
sir.
like data.
Yes, sir. and I said, it's not much, but it's there. So let's turn it in.
We are used to seeing things move incrementally.
Yes, sir.
And I'm quite sure that as we get closer to June 15th,
Oh,
that
yes.
you guys will feel the love from our profession.
Very much so. And we felt it on Saturday as
Okay,
well.
well, good.
Yes. It was fun. It was
Okay.
fun. It was enjoyable. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. Next report is from the Enforcement Division.
Good morning, Dr. Borland, board members. My name is Virginia Fields. I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division, and I'm here today to present the Enforcement Staff Report. Reviewing the report itself, it may be slightly redundant from the last time when my fearless leader, Christina Kaiser, was here to present the information about our division in those three separate areas: intake, investigation, and prosecution, and our cases and how they divide. The criminal history cases, the substantive complaints, and then department complaints, which are often a result of inspections. I think she also went over kind of our protocols, which are the criminal guidelines, which we have a work group with this new program working on currently. After that will be the enforcement penalty matrix, which will put a penalty to a particular substantive violation contained in either the statute or the rules. I am happy to let you know that I will be prosecuting these cases. In the Enforcement Division, Karen Cox, another prosecutor, and myself will be working on the medical and the health-related cases. That's all we're going to be doing, devoting our time strictly to these cases in the speech pathology, dyslexia, midwives, the podiatry, and other programs. So there is going to be a focus on the standard of care, scope of license, and whatever way we educate through the Enforcement Division, with just 2 prosecutors solely devoted to those cases. I've done TOE, but I'm not now. Okay. If I can, I'd just refer you to the end of it. Y'all like data? Let's work on it. And give you the behavioral analyst, or the key statistics anyway, for overall TDLR. Of course, once we get the penalty matrix up, criminal guidelines and applications start coming in, we'll have more specific key statistics for your program. So your data is general for the department overall for the year of 2017. I would only note the average time for key cases is 6 months generally. Again, they're divided up, if you'll notice at the bottom of the report on our case outcomes, to be more agreed orders. Essentially, it breaks down that, as most cases do, a third of ours will reach some sort of agreed disciplinary action. A third may be dismissed by insufficient or a warning letter, and then generally a third will go to hearing or default agreed order. So you'll notice that for 2017, we had 58 commission orders. Those are the result of full-blown hearings coming before the commission with the proposal for decision. That's out of all the programs. Thereafter, you have agreed orders. These are where the prosecution and the respondents have been able to come to some sort of agreement to resolve the complaint. And default orders typically are where respondent fails to appear or respond to the notice that's provided by the department. Penalties assessed and collected is generally about the way it works overall. Half of the penalties are generally collected, and that's a result of default orders or noncompliance with any agreed order and full payment. I'm happy to answer any questions with regard to Enforcement Division, Case Division, or the key statistics for TDLR.
So let me see if I understand correctly. When it comes to enforcement, the behavior analyst will be in a group with other, basically, human service professionals.
Yes, sir. Our prosecution.
I just want to reiterate that issue.
Yes, sir. The prosecution section, Karen Cox and myself, Virginia Fields, will be prosecuting what we are terming the medical and health-related programs. So anything that would fall within those auspices is going to be on our caseload.
I assume then that you guys are probably becoming very familiar with the ethical standards for the behavior analyst,
Yes, sir.
and perhaps we'll be looking for technical input on that.
And I assume, as a lot of these new programs have come in, there's kind of been an idea or a desire to go back and relook at your rules. Compared to, there's always a good opportunity to improve, especially in these transitions, to look at various options that you can do to tighten them up, clarify them, so to speak. We like the plain language around here, so a lot of times licensees or the public in general may have difficulty understanding what is being put forth. And it's a good time to clarify it when we look at the penalty matrix and try to put a penalty with the substantive, whether it's bad or good. And you start to revise as you look at these issues. They tend to kind of crop up on you.
I thought I heard you mention something about that there being some group within, or maybe you and your colleague, looking at the penalty issues now, the enforcement matrix. I think we have a board work group that also will be joining that task.
The matrix stems from the work group. It
Okay.
stems from the work group. We'll prepare you a draft based on experience and go through and make sure that at least all the violations are there to give you something to start working with.
Yeah, we don't want to leave out any of the good violations.
Oh, no, I don't either. But again, as far as where those are allocated or where they fall, we'll go to the work group, and then it'll be brought to the full advisory board for consideration of what the members in the work group have determined. And it all kind of gets hashed out first in work group with The prosecutors will be there. There'll be different people from different divisions, licensing and so forth, that'll be participating in the work group for penalty matrix. Now, on the criminal cases, as far as applications go, we have two really great prosecutors, Ken Sharp, Trevor Thielen, who do all of our applications. So I and Karen, to clarify, will be doing the substantive violations, like unlicensed activity, any breach in the standard of care with an expert's testimony, and any scope of license. But the criminal applications, those applications that come through and for some reason may have a determination to be made with regard to the history, criminal history, those would go with another prosecutor.
Okay. So okay, that's good.
Okay.
We hope that they don't have much to do.
We do too.
Yeah. Or you guys either.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Other questions or comments from the board? Ellen, did you?
I was Ellen Cato. I was actually just going to ask about an update on the enforcement work group. I was just curious if there was a timeline for any of the work groups.
I believe that Chris Russi, who was at the last meeting with my director, will be getting in contact to get everybody scheduled for the work group. And the first work group is going to be focused on the criminal history or the criminal
That's our
guidelines.
enforcement work group.
And this is what gives the prosecutors that do the criminal applications the ability to evaluate those applications that may have some criminal background. And again, this is a public policy consideration, much like
Yes.
a lot of people. You don't want a tow driver, that has a DWI, right, recent. So there are certain things that will tend to get a denial letter or a denial and non-reissue on those licenses.
Mary Winston, as Virginia was saying, someone from enforcement will contact you. Again, this is a situation where the expertise will be yours. The work group then bringing forth their work to the full advisory board, which will then move to the commission for ratification. So we'll kind of create that process or framework. By contacting you, it'll be in the form of our other penalty matrices, but the content comes from the board.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, thank you.
Any other else? Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate your report. Next is the regulatory program management. Don't recognize you with a different name.
It's taken me a while to get used to it
Yeah.
also. Good morning. I am Katie Bryce with the Regulatory Program Management Division, and I'm here to give our staff report. I believe you all already have a copy of the report, so I'd like to just kind of highlight some of the bullets on it. The second bullet down says staff has been regularly meeting with the bill implementation team to discuss forms, applications, FAQs, and other items. We've had an internal work group for this, and you'll be seeing some of the documents from that work group under item G on the agenda. I have gotten to attend the Dallas-Fort Worth Area Autism Conference in Hurst, Texas, and I also was able to attend several sessions at the Texas Association for Behavior Analysis Conference. That was last week. I enjoyed sitting in on Ms. Cato's and Dr. Borland's presentations and several others. I've also really enjoyed getting to meet more of the stakeholders in this group. Other than that, we are just still working to get FAQs up, review the website, and assist licensing and customer service with this program. Are there any questions?
Just to be clear, behavior analysts in this under the regulatory program management group are in with medical and health professions.
Correct. And this licensing
Where
program
we were
hasn't,
last time.
we
Yes.
haven't actually started issuing licenses or anything yet, but I am very invested in this. And so if there's any discussion about moving you all, I will definitely advocate for you to stay in this group.
Board members, Delia's passing out the organizational chart for our Regulatory Program Management Division, of which Katie is a part. So you will see on the left-hand side that behavior analysts remain with the other health professions in TDLR.
Very good. Thank you. We also like charts and graphs.
You'll fit right in here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. And last, and we presume not least, the report from the executive office.
Good morning, Carla James, TDLR. As you've heard a couple of times, and I assume you're all aware, we were at the conference last week, had 1,400 people at that conference. Our executive director, Brian Francis, was very pleased and excited. He loves a good crowd, so he was thrilled to be there. About 100 people attended his presentation. We're thinking it's not because of how dynamic he is, but that there was no CEs provided for that. So
Undoubtedly, that was it.
at least that's
If you give CEs, they will come.
yeah. That's what we've been telling him, so he feels better. So, but most of the questions that came about were when can we start applying, and that, of course, is June 15th. And as you've heard from Dee Dee and her group today, how the licensing process works. So I'm not going to talk about that extensively. Obviously, you all know about your own conferences. What I will talk about right now is the strategic planning process. All state agencies are required by law to do a strategic plan every 2 years that we provide to the governor's office, the legislature, and various other oversight agencies for the state. And part of that process is to get internal and external feedback. So we are about to embark on about a month and a half mystery tour. I haven't been through this, but I hear it's a very dynamic process. Or I haven't been through this at this agency. I've done it many times at other agencies. Part of this process is we're going to go around the state and have face-to-face meetings with what we call our stakeholders. We're going to have one in Austin, we'll be in Arlington, McAllen, Houston, and El Paso, and we're going to provide the opportunity for people to electronically kind of pipe in as well. And we ask a series of questions. What are we doing good? What could we do better? I think one of our questions is, if you were king or queen for a day, what would you do? What do you see happening in Texas in the next 5 years, and what do you see happening in your profession? And we take all of this information. I think we had about 8,000 comments the last time we did this. We filter through those. Some of the ones that we see, may be easy fixes, that low-hanging fruit. We don't like this on your website, or you've got some information on your website that's not updated, and we just go change that. That's not something we're going to put in a strategic plan to the governor's office and the legislature. But with the input from people around the state and our staff, we put together a plan that is presented to the oversight entities, and that forms whatever process or requests that we're going to ask for in the 86th legislative session. We were very aggressive last time. We did over 50 initiatives. We're not going to do that many this time. I'm getting older. I can't go at that pace anymore. Brian may be able to, but he'll be dragging me behind him if he does so. So we put together things such as, a certain statute needs to be changed based upon long discussions we've had with industry. We meet with industry groups as well. What are they seeing that's happening? What should we be planning for in the future? And we put together our legislative agenda through that, and obviously go in and speak with folks at the Capitol and the legislators to find out what they're interested in. Are they interested in the same things, and will they file bills to go in the directions that our stakeholders have requested? So I just wanted to give you a general overview of how that process works. We do not do specific program by program. The document can only be about 25 pages long, and with almost 40 programs, you can see that probably not the opportunity to go into extensive detail. But it does provide an overview to the legislature, and that's where the discussions begin. That is a process that flows into the budget process for the agency. Again, something that happens every 2 years. And so the information from the strategic planning process can feed into what's called the legislative appropriations request, and that's just basically the request by an agency to the legislature of what we need going forward for the next 2 years. So it is a process that will start now and will not complete until the end of summer, and then once that strategic plan is submitted, then we start preparation for the 86th legislative session. So just to let you know how that process works, and that we will be probably near you in the not-too-distant future. Our website is going to provide a lot of data on that, and I wish Nick was here because he's our website guy, but there is going to be extensive amount of information on there. We have emailed, gosh, I think almost 800,000 people this week, telling them that the process is about to start and how they can fill out a survey. And then that's where we get all our information from. So we'll probably be in your backyard in the not-too-distant future. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that.
I believe that process, the first meetings are on April 9, is that correct?
That sounds correct,
Arlington
yes.
and
Yes.
El Paso, I think?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's accurate. I'll be up in Arlington.
Okay.
So.
So what, will there be a opportunity for public input? I mean,
Absolutely.
comment, as well as then electronic information?
Absolutely. What we do is we.
Surveys completed, I mean, that's several ways one can have input then.
We have the face-to-face meetings, and those are very important to us. So what we do is we'll find a local hotel and rent their boardroom or their conference rooms or whatever. And then folks come in and we ask those questions that I told you about face-to-face, and we take their comments and we scribe them and bring them back and start going through them. So every city we go to, there's the opportunity for people to walk in and talk to us face-to-face and provide their answers in that open setting to the questions that we ask.
Good.
Mary Winston, I'm
Yes,
going to pipe in because I have been a part of this process, and this is really a wonderful time to get your thoughts out there. The face-to-face process has been enhanced this time. Sometimes people aren't comfortable saying things to your face, though I found that they were quite comfortable saying whatever they wanted to about TDLR, and that we took those notes. So one of my first sessions, I don't remember which program it was, someone said, "You suck." So I said, "Did we get that? We suck. Let's get this on the board." And he said, "Oh, no, I don't want that." I'm like, no, this is what we want. We want your feedback. I'm not going to put your name on it unless you want me to. But if that's the way you feel, so then the next question is, what can we do better?
Yeah.
And we go, just down the line. Again, we start in El Paso and Arlington on the 9th. We're putting it out there. We're going to put it out there more. It tends to be regional, the interest, but we'll see. And now we've added the electronic component where you can also not just tell us what we do wrong, to our face. You can then just tell us on your mobile device or computer, and you can tell us what we do well the same way. So it's really a great time if you want to get a message across for the legislature. This is the time to do it for your profession.
Thank you. I think that information is already being circulated among some of the professions, shall we say. Dr. Sokolowski.
I've got a question. And this is Dr. Sokolowski. I know the name. Thanks. Those dates are on your website?
Yes.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Do you have a special bus that you use for the Magical Mystery Tour?
I think it's called a rental car.
Please get it wrapped so we'll recognize it. Other comments or questions regarding the Executive Office report? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Item F on the agenda, the next item is discussion and possible recommendation regarding the proposed new rules at 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 121, to implement the newly created Behavior Analyst program pursuant to Senate Bill 589, 85th Legislature, regular session 2017, and discussion regarding public comments and responses to the comments on the proposed new rules. And thanks in advance.
The procedure and our task here today is to, and my name is Laura Pepperley, I'm with the General Counsel's Office. We need to review the comments, the public comments that were received during the comment period. We can have discussion on those. We need to decide whether or not to make any changes to the rule text based on those comments. And then at the end of this meeting, we will have hopefully a rule text that is ready to go to the commission that you're okay with. You've voted to send it for adoption. The commission will then review that and hopefully vote for adoption as well, and then it will be published and become effective. Those rules will be effective. So if you've looked at the comments, some of them are rather complex, bring up a lot of issues and points. I'll say now that at the time of adoption, we can't make large changes in what the rules address because the public hasn't had notice and had the opportunity to comment on that. So we can't make drastic changes at adoption. We do want to correct any errors. We can make something more clear. We can do some tweaks, but we can't introduce new subjects or affect new persons, make those significant kinds of changes. So there's no problem with discussing the comments as much as you'd like. The ones that have more complex subject matter and a lot of points may be more appropriate to send to the work groups so that more discussion can take place about those things. And so not discussing it in depth at this meeting is not an indication that those comments won't be addressed and further looked at, but the appropriate place may be in a work group, and then future amendments to the rules can be made based on what's in those comments if that's appropriate. So just because no changes might be made at this point doesn't mean those comments are discarded or ignored. So we can go through the comments and have discussion about them. I do have summaries prepared of what the comments say. I've grouped comments together that are similar.
Good.
We don't have to repeat every word that's in a comment or every idea or thought in there, but we do have to summarize them and we do have to address them. We have to say whether we agree or disagree and whether we're making a change or not based on that comment. So you have a draft of the rule text, and you'll see a few changes in there that I'm recommending that we make, but of course you have to agree. If you have additional changes based on the comments, we can add those. If you don't like some of the changes I've put in there, we can take those out. So it's completely open to what you want to do within the limits as I've described them as to changing or introducing a lot of content that isn't there already. And so we have like 20-something comments. We don't really need to discuss the subject matter of each one since some of them overlap and are the same subject. But I will say, I've summarized the comments and I've prepared a draft response. As we discuss, I can read my summary to you. I can read my draft response. You can agree with it or not. We can change that. When the rule is published for adoption, it's going to have the summaries of the comments and it's going to have the department's response. So whatever you decide the response should be, that's what we'll have in there, and whatever changes to the rule text, those will be in there. So at this point, if you want to pick and choose comments you want to discuss, or if you just want to kind of walk through them, they're in the packet that you have.
You've done this before. How would you prefer to begin, at least, and then we can perhaps come back for specifics, maybe whatever you think most efficient.
I don't have a sense yet of which comments in particular you might want to discuss further or discuss, in depth, but I could begin by reading you my summaries and my draft responses if you'd like, and then if that brings up a comment you want to talk about, then we can just go to that comment if that'll work.
I think that's great, because that may already may preempt us feeling a need to ask some of our questions.
Right. Yeah, and, you know, we could go to the comments and talk about it at any point. Some of these comments have a lot of data with them and that. And so, you know, as I said, this may not be something we can get into a lot in this meeting or want to, but, you know, anything that you want to address, we can go to the comment and look at that. So I'll just begin with my summaries of the comments and my draft response.
And are they, is this in here?
We have.
No.
We don't have a draft.
The draft.
You don't have this because I don't really want to poison the well, basically, or, you know, give you my thoughts first, but, you know, that's kind of what we're going to do here. But the draft response and the summary, if you feel like my summary is not accurate or missed a big point, you know, let me know so I can correct that, and also the response. If there's something in the draft response that you disagree with or I've just got it wrong, you can let me know, and then we can fix that. Those summaries and responses will be published with the rule, but those are flexible right now, just like the rule text is. We can make changes. So the preamble to the rule is where these comments and responses will be located. The preamble, when it's published, will look a lot like the proposal. It has certain sections. It'll say some different things, but there's going to be a preamble, and then there's going to be all the comments and responses laid out, the comments and the department's response, and then will be the rule text again. So these will be published as part of the rule, and because they're published as part of the rule, they basically are considered the rule. So if you say something in a comment, even though there may not be a rule on that, people will hold you to that. So we don't want to publish our responses and say something that either conflict with the rule or you know, it needs to all be consistent. So even if the response isn't directly, you know, translatable into a rule in the rules. Okay, you might have noticed that many of the comments were about the fee. So the first summary I have here says 13 individuals and Texaba commented regarding the licensing fee, including comments that the fee for the initial license is too high, the renewal fee is too high, the fees are higher than those for similar occupations and higher than the fees in some other states. The amount of the fees is not justified by the anticipated costs of operating the regulatory program. Other costs imposed on license holders for certification and continuing education are high. The fee amounts would be a hardship because many license holders work in low-paying settings, and the benefits to the license holders resulting from the licensing fees are not identified or justified. Questions were received regarding the license term covered by the fee, whether the fees might decline over time and with a larger number of license holders, and whether the criminal background check cost is included in the licensing fee. So here I'm trying to capture all the comments about fees in any way, shape, or form. So our response, and I will say this response is probably, well, it is the longest one I have in here to explain that because there were a lot of comments. Mostly I try to stick to a shorter response, but this one's a little longer. So the response, my draft response, the department analyzed the anticipated costs and revenues associated with the Behavior Analyst licensing program as part of the legislative effort adopting the enabling statute. At the time of the analysis, 1,109 behavior analysts, 81 behavior analyst doctoral, and 90 assistant behavior analysts in Texas were certified by the certifying entity DACB, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. Two significant changes have occurred since the time of the initial fiscal analysis. First, the number of certified individuals in Texas has since increased to 1,272 behavior analysts, 86 behavior analyst doctoral, and 101 assistant behavior analysts who may apply for Texas licensure through the department. Second, the department has made significant internal changes to its organizational structure, resulting in the need to reevaluate the earlier agency cost figures and the need for full-time employee equivalent positions, or FTEs, to support the behavior analysis program. In addition, as part of the recalculation, some of the figures that were originally used for cost predictions were determined to be inaccurate. In its updated fiscal analysis, the department estimates that 1.5 full-time equivalent employees, or FTEs, would be needed to regulate this new license holder population. The department estimates the employees would be required to start in the last quarter of fiscal year 2018 to be ready to begin licensing September 1st, 2018. For the last quarter of fiscal year 2018, these employees would cost approximately $25,103 in salary and payroll costs, $9,193 in employee benefits, and $720 in other operating expenses. According to the Legislative Budget Board analysis, startup costs for furniture and equipment would be $16,148 in 2018. Beginning in fiscal year 2019, the department estimates the salary costs each full fiscal year would be $83,676, and associated employee benefits would be $30,642 per fiscal year. Costs for operating expenses for each year would be $2,400. The department estimates that name-based criminal background check costs would be $1,280 in fiscal year 2018 and $1,280 every 2 years afterward when license holders renew. The criminal background check costs were included and calculated in the licensing fee and will not be a separate cost to applicants. Based on these predictions, the program costs are expected to be $52,443 the first fiscal year the rules are in effect, $116,718 in both the second and fourth years, and $117,998 in the third and fifth years the rules are in effect. There is an estimated gain in revenue in 3 of the first 5 years the rules are in effect, and no revenue gain or loss in the other 2 years, corresponding with the initial licensing in the first year and renewals following every 2 years after the first license. The amount of revenue from licensing fees is expected to be $235,180 in each of those 3 years. The licenses will be issued for 2-year terms. All potential license holders must hold licenses by September 1st, 2018, so it is assumed that they will be licensed by that date, thus obtaining their licenses in the first year the rules are in effect. In the years that the license holders do not renew, there will be no revenue other than new license holders obtaining their initial licenses. The number of new license holders that will enter the profession each year is unknown. The department is required to ensure that the revenue from each of its programs covers the cost of operating the programs. Recalculating the costs for recoupment through the licensing fees resulted in a revised fee of $165 for behavior analysts for both the initial and renewal fee for a 2-year license, and $110 for assistant behavior analysts for the initial and renewal fee for a 2-year license. The fees were established based on the fiscal analysis and are designed to spread the cost across the licensed population. Because the costs associated with the initial licenses and renewal licenses are similar, the initial and renewal fees were most appropriately made equal. Some commenters noted that other costs and fees associated with practicing the behavior analysis profession are high, but those costs are not part of the fiscal analysis of the implementation of the program in Texas. The department annually analyzes fees and the agency costs associated with operating each of its programs, and adjustment of the fees follows as necessary. The costs of the behavior analyst licensing program are spread across a relatively small population of license holders, but due to the requirement to balance revenues and costs, the department set the fees as it was required to do. During the legislative process to initiate the behavior analysis licensing program, the costs and benefits to potential license holders, patients, and clients, the public, and stakeholders were considered and weighed. The Texas legislature created the legislation to reflect its decisions about those considerations, and these rules implement the regulatory licensing program that resulted. The department's calculations relating to the costs and revenues and ultimately the fee amounts are reflective only of the financial aspects of regulation that can be estimated. Those calculations cannot capture unquantifiable benefits to each type of stakeholder from the implementation of the regulatory program, and the benefits of regulation do not necessarily fall equally on all categories of stakeholders. The fee amounts provided in Section 12180 have been amended in accordance with the updated fiscal analysis. And that those fees are in the rule text. You'll see that the initial fees are stricken, and the new fee is included on page 13 of the rule text. So that's a change to the rule text made in response to the comment. And you'll see they're reduced to 165 and 110 there. So if you have any changes you want to make or errors or anything that you want to point out in my summary of the comments or the response, this would be the time to talk about that.
Ellen Cato, I noticed that in the summary of your comments, did you say something about the comments related to the FTEs? I know that you explained it in your response, but did you say anything, because I know that was noted a couple of different times, that the number of employees.
Right, and this comment, summary and response, just address the fees. I do address the full-time employees in another summary and response, so yeah, we'll get to that one.
But I believe, the Gordon Borland, I believe you did note that just dropped to estimated number of staff FTE was 1.5 as opposed to 3.5 in the original projection.
Right, and that's addressed in the full-time equivalent response too. But yeah, I mean, I've indicated we recalculated. If you want me to include that we reduce it from 3.5 to 1.5 in this section, I can add that into the response.
I think that, Gordon Borland again, I think that would be good for people to see that, because that was a point of some concern.
Okay.
Other comments or questions on this set of issues?
Ellen Cato, and you did say in your comments, and I could have missed it, that the criminal background check was included in the...
Yes,
okay, perfect.
Right.
Any other, Gordon Borland, any other questions or comments, feedback on this issue at this point? That covers a large number of the public comments, I know. Some very substantive ones. Others, substantive issues were raised, but yeah, go ahead.
I will ask a question. And when would could people anticipate when do you recalculate the fee and change it? When does that come up?
It's in the proposed. These are the rules that are going to adoption if we approve it, and so it's been changed in there.
Right.
So
in the future, in other words, when might a future fee increase come about? Or
in the response, I included about how each year the department reanalyzes the fee, and if there is any significant reason to change it, then we need to go through rulemaking to change it, because it is in the rules. So it would be part of a rulemaking to change the fee.
And if I could, Carla James, TDLR. As Laura said, we do an annual fee analysis. Generally speaking, we don't go up on fees. Just as a general rule with this agency, our efficiencies and streamlining allow us to not have to do that. In fact, I don't recall the last time we went up on a fee. So what you see before you is likely going to be in place for a long time.
Gordon Borland, thank you. That's comforting. But I do remember from watching some of the other boards meeting that, in fact, there were some reductions in fees, in fact.
Yeah, generally we go down. I think one of the numbers that, and don't quote me on exact numbers, but in the last 10 years we've been able to keep over $30 million from coming into this agency and staying in Texans' pockets. So it's a lot of money that we're not collecting from folks.
Thank you.
We get exactly what, and as a side note, and a lot of folks don't really understand the budgeting process for the state of Texas, but as a regulatory agency, a licensing and regulatory agency, we're only supposed to bring in what we need to run our shop. And we can't add workers to our fold. We can't add FTEs unless we're allowed to by the legislature. That's determined by them.
Gordon Borland, just one other, I guess, follow-up on that. The annual recalculation, if there's a change in the fee, presumably it would be a reduction. What is the process for that? It goes into the rulemaking, so I think I know, but if someone could walk us through that, just to be clear on what the process is.
Sure. I'll talk about the money. I'll let Laura talk about the rules. But our finance area looks at all the different fees that we have, and it's a big drill down. You know, how many FTEs do we have working on this? What are the costs we've seen in the past year? Try to exclude any large costs that are not reoccurring, and determine exactly what we need to run that program. And then after that, if there is a need for a change up or down, and it goes through the rule process, and I'll let Laura speak to that real quickly.
Yeah, when that reanalysis is done, the costs aren't necessarily going to result in a fee change.
Right.
For example, we've discovered that we actually don't need as many FTEs to do all the work, and so maybe the fee might be able to be dropped based on that. But maybe we'd find out we need more FTEs, and yet we've automated something, and so our costs for licensing are less, and maybe it balances out. And overall we don't need a fee change. If we do need a fee change, it's like any other rule amendment. It would have to go through the proposal, public comment. Anybody could challenge those figures. Just like any other rule change, the fee change would, it'd have to be supported by the analysis, and we have to justify it. Our statute requires us to cover our costs, so we don't have any flexibility that we can charge a fee less than what our costs are. But it's not a figure we pull out of the air by any means. So it would just go through the regular rulemaking process, and it would probably be thrown in with any other amendments or anything that needed to be done.
Gordon Borland, I think that's important for people to understand, that it isn't just suddenly you're going to get that the profession would be blindsided by a fee change either direction. Probably if they were blindsided by a reduction, nobody would complain too much. But I think it's important that we all understand the process. Other comments or questions regarding this particular set of issues? Okay, thank you. I believe you have more.
Okay, and if something comes up while we're discussing this, we can always come back to this one and make any additional changes if we want to. Okay. The next comment, I put 2 individuals commented about exemptions from licensing, noting that there are frequently asked questions about exemptions on the website, but an absence of rule provisions about exemptions, and questioning the lack of an exemption from licensing for employees of the state. One of the commenters asked whether licensing would be a condition of state employment. In the response, the statute, Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 506, the Act, Subchapter B, provides that the Act does not apply to the activities and occupations listed in that subchapter. The list has not been repeated in the rules. The legislature did not specifically include state employees among those to whom the Act does not apply, and the department is not authorized to create exemptions from licensing or to make the Act inapplicable to additional occupations or activities. Employers may require employees to become licensed as a condition of employment, and the Act requires people to become licensed if the requirement to have a license applies to them. Persons not required to become licensed may choose to obtain a Texas license if qualified. No changes were made to the rule in response to the comments. So this one was really just, saying that there are facts about exemptions, but nothing in the rules. But it's only because they're in the statute and they're laid out in there, and we didn't feel the need to repeat them in the rules. And in general, that's how TDLR does things, is not to repeat all the statutory provisions in the rules. It really isn't necessary.
Any questions or comments regarding those issues?
Okay. These comments and responses are not in any particular order. I just kind of was plowing through the comments and writing them out, but I can always reorder them if you like that. But the next one is one commenter recommends a grandfathering period for 1 year to address the shortage of individuals practicing behavior analysis. And the draft response is, the Act requires persons practicing behavior analysis or using the title of licensed behavior analyst or licensed assistant behavior analyst to become licensed beginning September 1st, 2018. No person is authorized to identify themselves as a license holder or perform activities requiring a license after that date unless the person has obtained a Texas license. The department is not authorized to waive or delay imposing licensing requirements or to license persons who do not meet the criteria in the Act. No change has been made to the rule in response to this comment.
Questions, observations, board?
Ellen Cato, I have had just some questions about, is there any concern that in a 2.5 month period, all 1,200 of us, 1,400 of us could be licensed? So I guess just to reassure our colleagues that there will not be a lapse in their ability to generate revenue for and practice as a behavior analyst, that TDLR has no concerns about this.
Mary Winston, TDLR. I'm watching our licensing director in the back of the room shake her head. No.
That's why we moved it.
We want the process to go smooth. That's the calibration, and our internal changes really don't affect your program. The only effect is, oops, that's going to slow behavior analysts down. So let's move it around on the same team, just different group, to make sure there are no hiccups. So really, Dee Dee, how long have you been doing this?
24 years.
24 years. I always say, stop, no one, please don't speak from the back. And here I am asking for stuff from the back. But Dee Dee has done this for 24 years. And so I don't know how to issue a license. I'm sure I could read and find out, and they would explain it to me. But they know what they're doing. And when Dee Dee decided that this was the shift, everyone said, thumbs up, we trust your shift. So we're anticipating the 1,200, 1,400. We know it's coming. We moved you to a group that has the expertise, time to process that. We do not anticipate a problem. We're human. Anything can happen, but we are anticipating everything that we can beforehand, and we do not anticipate that this will be a problem.
And I'll, Carla James, I'll build on what Mary said. When I was talking about the calibration and said planning for the future, this is exactly what we were talking about. We want your profession to be up and running immediately.
It's Gordon Borland. Again, so you're anticipating an onslaught in early June, or late June, mid to late June?
For TDLR, how many licensees do we have? 700?
Yeah.
780,000. So the 1,400 is a large number. It's not an onslaught for these ladies and people. I'm sorry, Leonard, who work in licensing, but and anybody else who works there. I just thought of a guy who came to my mind. Also in customer service, I was kind of running around trying to get you guys that list before. But the number of contacts that they have on a daily basis is amazing. So we license a lot of people, so we don't want any glitches, but this is not a large number for us to handle.
Okay.
Carla James, for comparative purposes, I think we have how many tens of thousands of cosmetologists at the end? 400,000 cosmetologists happen about the same time every year. So we're ready for you.
Gordon Borland, that's reassuring. But I think that, but I agree with Ellen's comment. I know that's been an issue that people have raised, and I think part of it is because they don't understand the process of how streamlined you guys have done really, I think, in my opinion, an excellent job of streamlining that. So it's all it's almost exclusively online, which will help. And I think Ms. Sloan has a
Carol Sloan, one quick question on the last two comments, the one on the grandfathering in and the other one on the state employee exemption.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those, you're saying, require a change in the actual law. Is that Am I getting that
Right,
correct?
the statute doesn't authorize.
So we don't address that now. That would require change by the legislature? Is that true, to address those?
To create exemptions, yes.
To create an
we can't-
exemption.
We don't have authority to create
Okay,
them.
so-
If the
so-
statute gave us that power, we could, but, we don't have it. So, yeah, it would require a statutory change to allow us to create exemptions, or the statute could actually create the exemptions. And the grandfathering, that, again, is not in the statute that, we can grandfather, and so we can't do that on our own. We have to have authority from the statute. Either the statute has to say that, or it has to give us authority to say it, but it has to come from there.
So the answer to both those comments is really that's not within the purview of this department.
Right.
To make those kinds of changes.
Right.
Okay.
We're not authorized.
Mary Winston, but it is a comment that we would greatly appreciate during strategic planning, external strategic planning. If that's something, I don't know if that's a yay, nay, or moving toward that or not, but that's something that we can incorporate in the comments, if that's something. But that's as far as we have the authority to go.
This is Dr. Mock. Would you want our opinion on whether those should be things that should be considered? Or?
I have to tell you, Dr. Mock, honestly, when we are there, we always want input. And definitely during this process is where that input can be kind of shot directly to the top so they can hear it. We have had, during our last strategic planning, we had a very small program with very few members and professionals in that program. And they had such a large showing at one of the cities that a larger program, a larger profession had a small showing, was going back to their association to, really get on to them. This is the time to show up and show out and let us know what we can do. And the only way we can know is if you tell us. So we really appreciate input. And this time, I don't know the technology yet, but we're going to get it all together before we get out there where you can do it online. So if you're not in one of the cities or close to the city, you'll be able to still give that input. We want that input. If that's something you feel strong about or whatever, this is when we want it. If it's nothing you want to comment on, that's fine too.
Gordon Borland, any other comments or questions from the board? I think we're good.
Laura Pefferly, I was just going to make a note that the comment about the grandfathering didn't address sort of like the element of surprise, if you will, that this was happening too fast. If a person doesn't have their continuing education, they have a little time to get that done. If they're not certified, then they need to get certified because that's a basic requirement. And I don't think that's a surprise to anyone that was part of the legislative initiative from the beginning, that they have to be certified. So there really isn't a surprise element there. I think that's been out there, that you have to be certified. And if you're certified, then you're fine. If you ignored the fact that you had to be certified and didn't act on that, well, you just won't be able to get a license until you are. And so they didn't provide for grandfathering for a reason, for their reasons, and so it's just not there, and we can't create it. So.
Laura, I have one more thing. Mary Winston, again, I wanted to add. Dee Dee McEachern has stopped yelling from the back of the room, as per our request, but we were asking her to do it. We shouldn't have, but yeah, we were like, what is that? So she got me back in line, and she has messaged me here. She wants you to know that we issue 47,000 licenses each month. So just to give you that context. So then, she wanted you to know that, and she do know that.
Thank you for sending that message. Gordon Bourne, please continue.
Okay, Laura Pefferly again. The next comment, one commenter recommends that the department require license holders to report and track the persons working under the supervision of license holders. This commenter asked if supervision agreement templates provided by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board should be used and whether the department will post templates. The response, the Act imposes no supervision-related requirements on the department and requires only that the licensed assistant behavior analyst be under the supervision of a licensed behavior analyst. The department has chosen not to conduct tracking or monitoring or to otherwise administer requirements related to supervision or employment agreements or relationships, except to investigate irregularities that could affect a license holder's certification or license. The department does not seek to burden license holders with duplication of administrative requirements imposed by the certifying entity. License holders must, of course, comply with those requirements to maintain certification, including any reporting obligations and the use of the certifying entity's forms and templates if required by the certifying entity. No change was made to the rule in response to this comment.
Gordon Borland, any comments or questions from the board on that response? Thank you.
Laura Pefferly again. Two commenters questioned the requirement for examination, the purpose of the examination, and the rule provision allowing the department to impose additional examination requirements. And the response, the Act requires applicants for a license to pass the examination offered by the certifying entity. The rules provide that the examination conducted by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board is the designated examination. No other certifying entities have been approved, and therefore no other examination is yet approved. Examinations in addition to the one required by the certifying entity are not required or anticipated at this time, but the department has reserved the ability to require or accept an alternative examination or to impose additional examination requirements if necessary. No change was made to the rule in response to this comment.
Gordon Borland, any questions? Yes.
I do have a question. This is Stephanie Sokolowski. Based on the public comment that we had, if we as a board discussed an additional entity that we would use for that certification piece, how would that happen?
And we do have comments along those lines.
Do you want to wait until you have those comments?
Well, we can. We can discuss that after, because it is somewhat addressed in here. The actual process is not fleshed out in here as to how we would approve a certifying entity, another certifying entity, but that topic is addressed in the comments.
Let's complete that later.
Okay.
Gordon Borland, any other comments or questions from the board? Thank you. Let's continue.
Laura Pefferly again. One individual commented that the rules do not require education and that behavior analysts are not educated about or qualified to provide speech therapy, resulting in the inability to recognize the need for speech therapy and leading to the provision of inadequate or inappropriate therapy. The commenter recommends raising the education, supervision, experience, and continuing education standards for behavior analysts and assistant behavior analysts to parallel those for speech-language pathologists and assistant speech-language pathologists. The commenter further recommends that the provision of speech therapy be left to speech-language pathologists and assistants. And the response, the Act requires licensed applicants to have met the educational requirements of the certifying entity and does not impose additional educational requirements. Behavior analysis license holders may be required to become licensed in other occupations if their activities subject them to the licensing requirements of those occupations. The Act does not specifically define the complete scope of activities that a behavior analysis license holder might perform, but does exclude psychological testing, psychotherapy, cognitive therapy, psychoanalysis, hypnotherapy, and counseling as treatment modalities, and prohibits the diagnosis of disorders. The department is not averse to exploring the need for development of regulation regarding the respective scope of practice applicable to the speech, language, and behavior analysis professions, each of which it licenses and regulates. Because the scope of practice in these professions may touch or overlap, there is a need for caution before attempting to define and regulate the boundaries of the respective practices. That effort is outside of the scope of this rulemaking, At this time, the department is not enlarging or reducing any boundaries placed on the scope of practice by the certifying entity. As the department gains knowledge and expertise regulating these programs, and considering that both are evolving, the department will evaluate and reassess on an ongoing basis. Both of these regulated populations are encouraged to participate in efforts to identify and define scope of practice. No change was made to the rule in response to this comment.
Borland, questions or observations from the board members? Hearing none, please continue.
Okay. Laura Pefferly. One individual and TSHA, the Speech and Hearing Association, commented regarding scope of practice. Persons practicing behavior analysis do not have adequate education and training to provide many therapies and services they are providing, and their scope of practice should be better defined and limited to exclude areas of therapy more properly provided by speech-language therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and teachers of math and reading. And the response, the department agrees that the scope of practice should be evaluated and further rulemaking may be appropriate. However, defining the scope of practice of the behavior analyst and assistant behavior analyst is outside the scope of this rulemaking. The proposed behavior analysis rules were necessary to implement the legislation that created the regulatory program within the required time period, and further refinement of the rules will occur over time. No change has been made to the rule in response to this comment.
Warden Borland, any observations or questions from the board members? Hearing none, please continue.
And again, we can come back to any of these if we need to. Two individuals and Texaba commented that the need to hire 3.5 full-time staff for the operation of the behavior analysis program is not justified by the amount of work that will be required to operate the program, and this figure should be revised. And the response, the number of staff needed to operate the new program was determined from the information the department has about the program and from the agency's experience in bringing on new and existing programs and successfully implementing them. Based on what is known of the program and the estimated population size of license holders, the department initially believed that 3.5 FTEs was the appropriate amount of employees to be assigned to the regulation of this program, which includes licensing, compliance and enforcement, customer service, and other functions. The department reevaluated its predictions and calculations in light of the increasing number of potential licensees and new estimates that lower the anticipated costs associated with the regulation of behavior analysts. The expected number of FTEs now predicted for the program is 1.5. With additional knowledge and experience gained as the program begins operation and needs are reassessed, the number of FTEs may be adjusted and likewise potentially the fees. No change has been made to the rule in response to this comment.
Warden Borland, questions or observations?
Well, this is Dr. Dawson. You did make a change to the fee, though, so would that not be a change to the rule?
I could say the fee, it resulted in the fee being recalculated and the fee's been changed, but
Gotcha.
it hasn't changed the FTE.
Just small nit, but wanted to.
Okay.
Okay.
Warden Borland, other observations or comments from the board members? Hearing none, please continue.
This comment, and this is Laura Pemberley, one individual opposes the rule and comments that the profession of behavior analysis is coercive and coerces parents into using behavior analysis services through fear of adverse consequences if it is not used, that it encroaches upon other professionals helping those with autism, that the certifying entity advances determinism and requires certificates to administer painful aversion therapy, and that the Association for Behavior Analysis International approved one of these techniques, electric skin shock, as being aligned with its mission. And the response, the Act requires the department to administer a licensing program for behavior analysis professionals. The rules implement the program and regulate individual Texas license holders. The department has no authority over certifying entities or professional associations or organizations. The rules contain many provisions to prevent inappropriate, unprofessional, and deceptive practice by license holders. As the department gains experience and expertise in regulating this program, the need for expanded regulation to address abuses or misbehavior that is not adequately covered by the rules will be reassessed on an ongoing basis. All persons are encouraged to make a complaint to the department about conduct or treatment that they believe violates the standards and requirements in the Act and rules. No changes are being made to the rules at this time in response to this comment.
Dr. Borland, comments or observations, questions from the board members? I'd like to just state that the profession does not advocate the use of electric shock. I cannot help but just note that. That is not our modus operandi. There are specific regulations and requirements in the certifying entities, certifying bodies of rules regarding that. It's very clear. Also, there seemed to be an allusion to some actions or statements from the Association for Behavior Analysts International, and that's not an accurate encapsulation of those comments. Just want to say that. Other comments or questions from the board members?
Stephanie Sokolowski. The work that we do is not coercive. It's voluntary. That is part of what we offer is, would you like to have our services? So I would like that included.
So would you like to supplement the response? You know, I guess you might get the impression that our responses are too narrow, but what the comment and response process is about is changes to the rule. So we don't really want to get into debates about the content
Dr.
necessarily.
Sokolowski,
but whether we
Mary
need to
Winston, I'm
change
sorry.
something.
I think, Laura, that you just want to put this comment out there into the public, that you want to make that clear to everyone listening and who will be listening.
Right.
Yes.
And
Much as the same
that's
with Dr. Borland.
Yes.
And
That's
this
all.
is Brad Bowman, General Counsel, just to kind of chime in on that point. The responses to the comments that Laura is going through, those are from the department, and so we definitely want your input and to weigh in on that. But ultimately, it's a department response, and so but we have your comment kind of on the record here today, and appreciate that. So
Thank you.
And I would too like to just make it on the record. I appreciate your kind response in your document, but as a consumer member, and have benefited, my family has benefited personally from services of behavior analysts for over the years. I would say they are all about making this an individualized program and bringing out the best in every individual. And that includes sometimes allowing them to be the eccentric personalities they are, and this profession does a great job of that, in this, my opinion, as a consumer member. So,
Well, in any comments we receive, we don't discount them.
Sure.
We may not be able to change anything, and I'm saying here, we don't regulate what the certifying entity allows or doesn't allow. I mean, I attended the conference, and there obviously is a role for some aversive therapy to prevent self-inflicting, damage to a person. So, but that's a debate about principles in the profession. It's not really, something we can address in the response to comments. It could be a work group issue, deciding whether we need to make a rule change or otherwise address those kinds of things. But it's sort of an issue in the profession, and as I said, we don't discount any comments, but we do have to answer, and it's filtered through what we can do in the rules.
This is Gordon Borland. I appreciate your comments and that of the board members. And we certainly understand that the rules are, the comments are largely constrained by the statute and the content of the rules, and as it should be. And I certainly would agree that no comment should be disregarded, because someday it might be one of mine. But I think we're nice people for the For the most part. And yes, we do have our eccentricities, even some of us. Other comments or questions from the board members? Thank you. Let's continue.
The next comment is from Texaba, and there were several components to their comments, so I just picked those apart and numbered them, so I'll have several comments and responses for the overall Texaba comment. I did include Texaba's comment about the fee in the fee comment and response, so I won't repeat the Texaba comment on the fees in their comments here, but it has been addressed. So the first one, number one, for the Texaba comments, and in the introduction to the public comment section, I've explained that we received, let's see. There's a little summary before the comments that says that we received 19 comments from individuals, one from the entity Behavior Frontiers, and from 3 organizations, which are the Texas Association for Behavior Analysis, or Texaba, Public Policy Group, and the Texas Association for Behavior Analysis. In other words, Texaba and the Texaba Public Policy Group commented jointly, and that's noted. And then the Texas Speech Language Hearing Association, or TSHA, also commented. So that's explained in the beginning of the comment section. So the organization Texaba provided the following comments. 1, the fiscal impact statement states that the department needed to hire 3.5 additional full-time employees, but the governmental growth impact statement states that the creation of new employee positions is not required. The governmental growth impact statement, they're referring to that portion of the preamble in the proposed rules where we have to do the governmental growth impact statement. So they're pointing out the conflict. The response is the fiscal impact statement indicates the number of full-time employee equivalents the department expects will be needed to fulfill the statutory requirement to create and operate the licensing program. The governmental growth impact statement focuses on requirements imposed only by the rules or by implementation of the rules. The rules do not impose or create requirements for staffing the program. No change was made to the rule in response to this comment.
Laura, before we continue, Dr. Borland, I don't know, we're about halfway through this. I don't know if you maybe want to allow folks to take a little short break. That's completely up to you. I just wanted to offer that up.
Gordon Moreland, what would the board's preference? Oops, we lost one.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take a break. Let's do that for, I'm seeing body language that suggests a break would be in order. How long are we looking at? 10 minutes?
Yeah, you want to come back at 11?
Yes, about 10:50. We're in recess or break or whatever we are.
You get it in any profession.
Louder? Now, resident. Okay. The Behavior Analysis Advisory Board meeting is resumed about 11:54, I think. Or 11:04, excuse me. 11:04 a.m. Okay, I believe Ms. Pepperly has additional information to present.
Okay. We're continuing, this is Laura Pefferly, we're continuing with the Texaba comments, and the next one, it just brought up the fact that the proposal said 1,280 persons are required to be licensed, but the current total is 1,458, and my response is the department's fiscal analysis for the behavior analysis program was performed when the enabling legislation was being created, and that analysis was also used for developing the rules for the new program. The department agrees that the analysis should be updated and has revised the fiscal analysis to reflect the increase in the number of certified persons in Texas, currently at 1,459. The revision of the fiscal analysis has resulted in lower licensing fees, so Section 11480 fees has been amended accordingly. No changes to the rules were made in response to this comment. So that's just a number update. Their next comment is that, and this is a rule change in 121.22A3. They point out that this term, it says, to qualify for an assistant behavior analyst license, a person must be in compliance with the applicable supervision requirements of the certifying body at all times when practicing behavior analysis therapy, and they suggest changing it from behavior therapy to applied behavior analysis. And so the change we're making, I just put the department agrees that the rules should be internally consistent and has changed the term to behavior analysis. So instead of behavior analysis therapy, it's going to say behavior analysis. And the other change in that sentence, just for consistency, I'm recommending to change from certifying body to certifying entity, because that was the only place it said body, so just for consistency. So that's all on the third page of the rule text, those two changes to be made.
Gordon Borland, any questions or comments from the board members? I'd just like to note that the original language did not, on 121.22A3, did not include the words analysis at all. It just said behavior therapy.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which
So
was
we're
then
adding,
changed
yeah.
to behavior analysis.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Everything's underlined is kind of
Yeah,
messy.
yeah, right. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay, and then, and their other comment is about the text on, let's see, it's 12170, which is on page 10. They're commenting that this should not read as it did. It says, maintain legible and accurate records of behavior analysis services rendered. A license holder practicing in an educational setting, including a school, learning center, or clinic, shall comply with the record-keeping requirements of the educational setting or with the retention requirements of the certifying entity if more stringent. So they're recommending that this not say, that it say, as the changes indicate, a license holder practicing in an educational setting, comma, school, learning center, or clinic. instead of grouping them all as educational settings. And so the issue is whose record-keeping requirements they need to comply with, and I didn't feel like that was making a change. I'll read you my response. Because the license holder is required to comply with applicable record-keeping and retention requirements imposed by the certifying entity or imposed by the service setting, the department believes the suggested change creates no additional obligations on license holders and is within the scope of this rulemaking. The recommended change to 12170B9 has been made. So that would be up to you if you agree that that change should be made.
Gordon Borland, comments from the board members or questions? Just as an observation, I can understand how that, with the original wording, some might have used that to come back and try to include that, infer that these services were all educational settings, which has some very significant implications for, were that to be so construed, for billing and legal issues in terms of other statutory requirements. If ABA, all ABA is lumped under educational settings. Whereas elsewhere in the rules, it does not so indicate, but my experience in the world has led me to imagine that people might make that inference. I think this is a good setting, a good revision.
Good change.
Okay. Good change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The next comment they had was on 12175B6.
Did we skip number 5?
They recommend that 12175B6 should be changed from all license holders shall be knowledgeable of all available information relevant to the behavior analysis services being provided to the client to all license holders shall be knowledgeable of all available historical and current information relevant to the behavior analysis services being provided to the client. And my response was, the department disagrees and believes that the proposed rule is clear and appropriate in scope. The recommended change would not improve the rule. No change has been made in response to this comment. And I partly drafted that because we had discussion about this in the last meeting, and I felt like you wouldn't probably want to make that change, but.
Gordon Borland, comment or question from the board members? I do remember we had extended discussion about that and tried to come up with some way of making that clear. The issue, I think, was historical and current information, but that's broadly, I guess, the original wording doesn't assume more than that necessarily, just whatever's relevant. Is that the interpretation?
Yeah, I think, well, the gist of the discussion was that you wanted it to be within the behavior analyst discussion or discretion as to what was relevant and what they should look at and what was available. And so I didn't feel like the narrowing here was necessary or appropriate.
Gordon Borland, any other comment or observations from the
Ellen
board
Cato,
members?
did we skip number 5? Or are we just going in a different order? 121.70B12. Texaba just made comment on it.
It was addressed in the, Gordon Borland was addressed in the
Oh,
rules.
okay. This was, I'm not sure if we had a comment, but if it might be a department change, but yeah, that's addressed either in a different comment or that was just department change. I have to look, but we'll get to it if it's in the comments. Yeah, that wasn't part of that comment, that change there.
Right, sorry, we had just been kind of going in order of Texaba's comments.
Right.
So, no worries.
think there was a comment, but it's coming. Okay. Okay, so the next comments are from the TSHA organization, and again, I divided them up and numbered them, and the first one was that we shouldn't rely on the BACB Code of Ethics to regulate license holders, and they're pointing to 12170D that requires license holders to comply with the requirements of the certifying entity, not the department, if the requirements of the certifying entity and the department conflict, and the license holder can't reasonably comply with both requirements. And so the response to that is the Act imposes the requirement that all applicants for licensure must be certified by a certifying entity. It also requires the department to create rules to regulate license holders and requires license holders to comply with the Act and rules. Part of complying with the Act is maintaining certification by the certifying entity. The certifying entity obligates license holders to comply with its requirements, and the department requires compliance with both the Act and the rules, and by virtue of requiring certification with the requirements of the certifying entity, so that the license holder can maintain the necessary certification. Should the license holder be subject to conflicting requirements, a decision to comply with the state requirement at the cost of violating the certifying entity's requirement could jeopardize the certification and result in the loss of both the certification and the department license. The provision waiving compliance with a state requirement is provided only for this limited purpose of protecting the certification and does not shift the regulatory burden to the certifying entity. No change was made to the rule in response to this comment.
Gordon Borland, any question or response, comment from the board members? Hearing none, please continue.
Okay. Laura Pefferly, the next comment was that the licensing requirement should be imposed on board-certified assistant behavior analysts, registered behavior technicians, and applied behavior analysis line therapists. And I put that the comment compares and contrasts the qualifications and duties relevant to these occupations and describes perils associated with the lack of a license requirement, including no mandatory background check. And the response is that the Act created only two licenses, behavior analyst and assistant behavior analyst. The Act does not authorize the department to create additional licenses. Rule 12170B11 imposes responsibility on license holders for the actions of unlicensed persons employed or contracted by them and prohibits delegation of services, functions, or responsibilities requiring professional competence to a person not competent or not properly credentialed. The department performs a criminal background check for every new and renewal license application and denies or does not renew licenses if applicants fail. No change was made in response to this comment.
Gordon Borland, any comments or questions from the board members? Hearing none.
Laura Pefferly. The BCBA Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysts does not put consumer safety and well-being first, but demands promotion of their field above all else. The code does not prohibit all use of harmful reinforcers. And the response, the Act requires license holders to maintain certification by their certifying entity in order to hold a Texas Behavior Analysis license, so license holders must comply with the requirements of the certifying entity. The department has no role in the creation and imposition of requirements by certifying entities upon those certified by them. No change was made to the rule in response to the comment.
Gordon Borland, any observations, questions from the board members? Hearing none, please continue.
Laura Pefferly. Registered behavior technicians, or RBTs, perform the bulk of direct behavior analysis services, but the BACB Code of Ethics places no limit on the number of RBTs who may be supervised by a license holder. The commenter advocates placing such limits. And the response, imposing substantial limitations on the supervision relationship that exceed those of the certifying entity is not required by the Act and is outside the scope of this rulemaking. The department may examine developing limitations or requirements regarding the supervision relationship that may exceed those of the certifying entity as the program begins operation and needs can be assessed. No change was made to the rule in response.
Warden Borland, any observations or questions from the board members?
I think that is something that we should look at the number of supervisees that are. So I think you said that it puts, that we can, and I think we probably should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing that that's something that could be work grouped and looked at for sure.
Warden Borland, other questions or comments? Certainly sounds like I would agree, sounds like a work group. Task. For the board work group, to be clear. Please continue.
The next one, the BACB Code of Ethics requirement for professional cooperation and the requirement for professional collaboration in the American Speech Language Hearing Association Ethics Code are compared and contrasted. The commenter states that the difference in emphasis puts the profession of speech-language pathology at high risk for encroachment and inappropriate representation of behavior analyst services, and recommends amending the rule to rectify the deficiencies and keep the public safe. And the response is the Texas legislature in 2015 passed legislation moving the speech-language pathologist and audiologist program to the department from the Department of State Health Services. In 2017, the legislature created the new licensing program for behavior analysis, for which the initial rules are being adopted here. The department recognized the role of the BACB and ASHA in developing standards and guidance for these occupations. The department is not averse to exploring the need for development of regulation regarding the respective scope of practice applicable to each profession. Because the scope of practice in these professions may touch or overlap, there is a need for caution before attempting to define and regulate the boundaries of practice. That effort is outside the scope of this rulemaking. At this time, the department is not enlarging or reducing any boundaries placed on the scope of practice by the certifying entity. As the department gains knowledge and expertise regulating these programs, and considering that both are evolving and the department will evaluate and reassess on an ongoing basis. Both of these regulated populations are encouraged to participate in efforts to identify and define scope of practice, and no change was made to the rule in response to the comment.
Warden Borland, any comments or questions from board members?
How will scope of practice issues, they're very important as someone who's benefited from these services, how will they be addressed? What's your...
Primarily, that's going to be something that is going to have to fall to the work groups of the board with the staff participation. And if we need to do further research, investigate how we can define those scope. The department does regulate both of those professions now and licenses them. So it is an issue that we agree we need to look at. It's just not something that we can, do at the adoption of this rule, because it hasn't even been addressed in the proposal. These rules are to get the program up and running, and that's going a big step beyond to start doing that. So, but
Carol Sloan again. And that's I appreciate your response on all of that. And as a someone who has had both those types of services, I was just very interested in what the process will be, who instigates. Obviously, someone's addressed this in the rules, and that brings it up there. In the comments. Mm-hmm. So is it, you said work groups will probably address this in the future?
Right, the work groups of the board.
Gordon Borland, that's certainly that's a dynamic set of issues, and that's going to be an ongoing conversation. It is among numerous professions. This is not out of the unusual that two professions, allied health professions or human service professionals, would have that. It happens within others. So it's a healthy dialogue I'm sure we'll be having, and the statutes for both professions regulating both also are somewhat constraining, but also somewhat permissive, as I understand them. So in terms of overlap, as you say, so. Ongoing conversation, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Other questions or comments from the board members? Please continue.
Laura Pefferly. The next comment is about the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, or QABA, and the Behavioral Intervention Certification Council, or BICC. And it's saying that those are certifying entities and that they should be included in the rules as certifying entities, and points out the harm that excluding them from the rules is causing. And so the response is that the Act defines the certifying entity to mean the nationally accredited Behavior Analyst Certification Board or another entity that is accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies or the American National Standards Institute to issue credentials in the professional practice of applied behavior analysis and approved by the department. That's actually a quotation of the actual definition in the Act. To date, no certifying entities other than the BACB have met this standard or have obtained approval by the department. As individuals apply for licensing, other certifying entities will be evaluated for approval by the department as necessary. Approving certifying entities need not, or approved certifying entities need not be listed in the rules to be recognized as approved certifying entities, and no entity is excluded by the rules from consideration for approval. No change to the rule has been made. I would point out that the Act does not exclude the possibility of any other certifying entity becoming qualified, and the rules likewise do not exclude that. I was very careful to write it so that it does cover any certifying entity that does apply and becomes approved. One of the problems that may arise in this is that some certifying entities are specific only to autism, and this statute is not specific only to autism. So that could stop the show right there. We'd have to look at it.
Gordon Borland, other comments or questions from other board members? If I understand your comments, that in fact a limitation on who can be considered a certifying agency is specified in the statute, and it specifies that that entity must be basically certified or by some other entity. A couple of different entities.
Right, the National Commission for Certifying Agencies or the ANSI, right.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the board isn't acting arbitrarily in deciding who can be. I mean, there's some guidelines to
right.
Not the board, but to the commission, to the department.
Right, as to who could be.
So you have constraints on who can be. Okay.
Right.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying that. Other questions or comments on this issue? Thank you. Let's continue.
Their next comment is about 12120C. This is on page 3. There's a long list in 121.20 of all the things that the department may ask for from people. That most of this is something that the board is asking for the certification, so we don't ask for it again, but we reserve the right to ask. So there's a long list there, and the comment is that they recommend expanding this to the department may require an applicant to submit additional information or documentation of an applicant's qualifications to provide supervision, to specifically include verification of meeting the 2015 BACB standards, the QABA's coursework, the BICC coursework or standards, other approved certifying entities' coursework or standards, or verification of having met defined standards to provide supervision for those providing supervision before January 1st, 2015, when the BACB instituted defined supervision standards. The defined standards would include unencumbered BACB certification, unencumbered psychologist licensure, or other unencumbered licensure at the time supervision was being provided. And they also recommend amending it to exempt persons who received their certification before January 2015 from the requirement to provide documentation of supervision relationships, because no documentation was required before January of 2015 and therefore couldn't be provided. And the response is, the Act imposes no supervision-related requirements on the department and requires only that licensed assistance behavior analysts be under the supervision of a licensed behavior analyst. Applicants who are certified by the BACB and who are in compliance with its supervision-related requirements will not be asked to provide information or documentation about supervision qualifications unless the department requests it for enforcement or other purposes. Likewise, if other entities become department-approved certifying entities, applicants who are in compliance with the certifying entity's requirements for supervision will not be asked to provide additional information or documentation unless necessary. The department has chosen not to conduct tracking or monitoring or to otherwise administer requirements related to supervision or employment agreements or relationships, except to investigate irregularities that could affect a license holder's certification or license. The department does not seek to burden license holders with duplication of administrative requirements imposed by the certifying entity, and will request documents only when a specific need arises. The department sees no need to insert in the rule a list of alternative supervision documents that might be requested. No change was made to the rule in response to the comment.
Any, Gordon Borland, any comments or questions from the board members? Thank you.
And they next recommend listing by name the Qualified Autism Service Provider credential and the BICC certification, in addition to the BACB certification in the qualifications for licensure as an assistant behavior analyst. And the response is, the Act defines the certifying entity to mean the nationally accredited BACB or another entity that is accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, or the ANSI, to issue credentials in the professional practice of applied behavior analysis and approved by the department. To date, no certifying entities other than the BACB have met this standard or have obtained approval by the department. As individuals apply for licensing, other certifying entities will be evaluated for approval by the department as necessary. Approved certifying entities need not be listed in the rules to be recognized as approved certifying entities. No change to the rule has been made in response to the comment.
Gordon Borland, any comments or questions from the board? None? Thank you.
And the next comment is that they compare the availability and cost of the BACB Assistant Behavior Analyst exam unfavorably to the QABA Credentialing Board QASP exam, and they recommend listing both exams as the exams designated and approved for the Assistant Behavior Analyst license. And they say the designation of only the BACB exam unfairly favors the BACB and negatively impacts qualified potential providers and supervisors. And the response is, the Act requires applicants for a license to pass the exam offered by the certifying entity. The rules provide that the exam conducted by the BACB is the designated exam. No other certifying entities have been approved by the department, and therefore no other examination is yet approved, and no change was made in response.
Gordon Borland, any comments or questions from the board members? None? Thank you.
And that was the end of the comments, but I made a note that we made changes in 121.22, and I believe that was the, if any, change that was noted.
Ellen Cato, it was 121.70B12 was where the if any was added.
Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, the 12122 was changing body to entity, and then in 12195, that's on the very last page of the rules. It has there that a license holder shall display the license certificate with a current license card as issued by the department in the primary location of practice, if any. And I'm suggesting just to remove the license card because they wouldn't have to display the certificate and the card at the office. The card is really to carry with you when you're in the field, and so you don't really have to display that. And so it's really not much of a change there, but I thought that was appropriate. And I think this adding the if any on page 10 in that 12170 B12, that I thought there was a comment, but I think maybe there wasn't.
This is West
I'll
Hudson.
check
There
on
is
that.
the
There is.
Texapa.
Okay.
Texapa document, it was number,
5.
their 5th comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll double check and cover that, but yeah, this is just one instance where we say display the license in the primary location of practice, and we didn't add if any on this one, but it was added in a couple other spots, so I thought that was fine to add that there. So the changes to the text so far as we've been discussing are none other than what's here, and you seem to be okay with all of these. There are a few tweaks on the responses to make, but otherwise, unless you want to go back to any of these, I think we may be okay on, what we've done so far.
Gordon Borland, what is the pleasure of the board regarding this? Further questions about specific comments or anything more? Yes, Carol.
One quick
Ms.
question,
Sloan.
Carol Sloan. You had mentioned on the one about other certifying entities, and you referred back to, was it the statute that had a national?
Yes, it's.
That's in the statute? Okay.
Yeah, it's in the definition of certifying entity. It basically
Okay.
says BACB, or you meet these other two standards, and you need to be approved by the department. And so that's our criteria, what we have to look at to approve another certifying entity. And like I've put in the responses, we haven't, no other certifying entity has applied to be approved. And if we have licensees or applicants that come in that have these other certifications, then we'll need to look at that.
And this is West Hudson, so just to clarify again, for pointing that, if you did have another certifying entity that came in and met all those requirements, then some of those follow-up comments about accepting their tests, their supervision, things like that, all that's taken care of, because then they'd be that approved entity by the board.
Right, and, I suppose it's possible that there are other certifying entities that don't offer an exam, and if that would happen, that, the rules allow for us to impose an exam or create one, or, it covers that contingency, or if BACB stopped offering an exam, you never know what could happen, so it's covered, but they would have to be approved to be a certifying entity. That would be the threshold.
Stephanie Sokolowski, I do have a question about displaying the license, but it's from my own perspective. Shall I wait and let us comment on this? Go on with it? I have 2 offices, and it says display it at the primary office. Does that mean I'm not required to display anything at my other office? Is that the assumption?
This is something actually that has come up, and we actually have some amendments to discuss.
Okay.
That will actually do address that.
Okay, so we can wait?
Yeah, that's going to be the next item on here. So.
You transitioned and you didn't know
That
that.
I did.
Gordon Borland, other comments or questions regarding the proposed changes to the rules? I think is where we are.
Yes, you'll need to vote whether you recommend that they be adopted with the these changes to the comments. There are no changes to the rules in addition to what we discussed. There is the one typo in the fees. One of the old fees is not strike-through, but, that'll be fixed. Other than that, there won't be any changes other than what you see here.
I propose that we accept the changes as discussed.
Motion's been made by Dr. Mock that we accept the proposed changes to the rules. Is there a second?
I'll second. Wes Dotson.
Okay, Wes Dotson is second. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor of accepting the proposed changes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Or show of hands if you wish. Any opposed by nay or show of hands? Any abstentions? The motion has been approved unanimously, so I believe we have recommended these regulations as revised, discussed today, to be sent forward to the TDLR, to the Commission for review. Is that where we are at the moment? Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman, this is Brad Bowman. Laura, you might have mentioned this earlier, but the plan right now is that the Commission is meeting on March 27th, and this is an item that they would take up at that meeting and potentially adopt at that time.
Okay. Gordon Borland, thank you. Anything else we need to do before we move on to the next item on the agenda? If not, then I think we're forging ahead to item G on the agenda, discussion of possible rule amendments and actions to assign topics for consideration for amendments to work groups, including standard of care work group, possibly including the following topics: multiple relationships, treatment area and surroundings, provision of products and services by the behavior analyst, authorize representatives of patients, electronic documents and signatures, scope of practice, reporting to and from certifying entities, practice insurance, and related matters. So I believe Ms. Pefferly is prepared to talk about this issue, this item.
Yes. We have some handouts for you, and initially I thought you might want to have discussion. You may want to review the materials, have some discussion. I think this whole item is appropriate for work groups, and we've already talked about that a lot of these issues do need to be work grouped. Of course, the work groups have not yet met because we've been focused on adopting these rules as written, and this is basically an amendment that which would be initiating a new rulemaking to do amendments to address these particular issues. And so the process would be that the work groups would meet, and research could be done, contacts made, more information assembled in order to make amendments. What you're getting there is one document that has some research that Katie has done, looking at other states' laws and kind of putting that together to show you some provisions in other states' laws. She didn't include a document I thought was good that we can get to you, which is a very detailed set of rules from Missouri, and it has a lot of information there. Those I think are good to look at in addition to what you're looking at there. It seems like Ohio and Missouri have pretty good detailed rules. And then the other document is some draft changes that I put into the current rules, just for you to look at. Nothing nailed down. Just my thoughts about some rule text changes you might want to look at to consider going forward. You won't see anything in there yet about insurance. I took the opportunity to ask about that at the conference, and various people allowed me to pick their brains about that. And I can't say I have a really good answer, but apparently there's a registry, and there are certain thresholds for insurance coverage. And so I'm not really sure of the parameters of that issue and whether we need or want anything in our rules about it. But that one would would need some more work for sure. And then the issue of reporting and communication between BACB and TDLR about regulatory issues, that needs to be developed. And I did speak to their general counsel, who gave me the contact there, and so we'll be following up certainly on that, since we'll have enforcement issues down the line. So that is something that doesn't necessarily need to be worked on in a work group, but that's kind of a to-do list item. But several of these other issues, you'll see some draft language in there about those particular topics, and I certainly do not say that what I'm putting in there is what we're going to wind up with, if anything. You may decide you don't want to add anything to the rules on some of these topics, but that's the kind of thing that the work groups would address. Whether to make changes, what those changes should be, the scope, whether they're allowed by the statute, whether we have authority to make them. And so that's why they're appropriate for work group discussion. But if you want to talk about any of those now, or if you want to make assignments of any of those particular things to particular work groups, this would be a good time to do that, so that then we can start doing work groups as we're going forward.
Gordon Borland, let me make sure I understand. The document entitled, that first page says contents. The highlighted items, which include, are the proposed changes, correct?
Yes, everything in yellow is something new.
Right.
And the numbering is not, I didn't address that because it's just looking at the content and the placement. So, yeah, that's basically the rules you're looking at today, with those things kind of plopped in there to look at.
Gordon Borland, thank you. Some of this is going to require a bit of reflection.
Right.
I understand. My assumption, board members, is that we're not prepared to really take action on recommendations on these today. Is that correct? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
But if you want to,
But we
assign
need-
work group tasks for looking at those, there are 4 potential work groups. There's licensing, scope of practice. You've already assigned the members of those work groups, but if you wanted to assign particular topics to start working on, that you could do that.
Gordon Borland, I think we probably do need to divvy up the work, because we need to get on it. Did someone?
I think Mary's about to speak.
Mary,
Sorry.
yes,
Thank you. My
please.
mouth was open. Katie was talking to me, and I think at the last meeting, I was looking at the members who were assigned to work groups, and the work groups haven't met yet, but staff will contact you with those. Yes, so with these specific tasks that Laura has just presented us the information, it's for review by the whole board, but the different work groups we have: enforcement, licensing, education and examination, and which we didn't need, so that's probably going to go away, and standard of care work group. Some of these topics will fit into those different groups. We're going to talk in a minute about scheduling the next meeting, but we want to have a chance for the work groups to meet before we come back as a whole body, so we can flesh out some of these things. So, Dr. Borland, unless you want to go through these, this is something that would be handled in individual work groups when staff reaches out, so that you guys can meet. And of course, you can meet remotely via phone. You don't have to come back in.
This is Gordon Borland. So the work groups, board work groups that are relevant are enforcement, licensing, and standard of care. Is that
Yes.
correct? Those 3. Okay. So we will need to be addressing these various issues. So make sure I'm understanding. So the part of the task of the work groups is to perhaps consider these proposed amendments, and also I think there's issues delineated here in the agenda that are, there may be some that are beyond, that are not addressed here. Is that correct?
Some are not addressed here.
Some are, clearly. I mean, just
Yes.
a cursory overview, I see they are.
Right.
We talked earlier, Ms. Virginia Fields spoke with you about the enforcement work groups and what they're going to do. And with new programs, that's one that really kind of hits the ground running.
Mhm.
So, and while we were sitting here, I emailed someone in that division to see about getting that set up and when they were going to be prepared to meet. So that was not mentioned specifically here, but you'll be hearing about that work group. And these topics, multiple relationships, treatment area and surroundings, those are going to go more into standard of care. And we have, of course, Dr. Borland, you're in that work group, Dr. Mock, Ms. Snyder, and Dr. Dodson. If you want to separate those out now and assign them to specific work groups, you can do that. Or if you would just prefer to review the documents and let staff reach out to you, which you're going to do anyway. But, you know, if you just want to take a look at it and kind of assign now the work groups, but it's up to you.
Okay, Gordon Borland, I think I would like to at least make a rough delineation.
Sounds good.
Because it looks, given your comments and just my cursory overview, a lot of the items listed here in Agenda G do appropriately seem to fall under the standard of care. Enforcement is not listed here, but it's a separate issue that we've got to get rocking on. I'm trying to decide which, if any of these items that are under Agenda Item G would not pertain to the standard of care work group. I guess is what I'm trying to, by elimination, which needs to go somewhere else. So that's a lot.
Well,
What
maybe
about the
reporting to and
from?
certifying, I'm sorry.
I was saying the exact same thing.
So somebody say it.
Ellen Cato, the reporting to and from certifying entities, that could perhaps go under, would that be under enforcement?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be about enforcement issues, so, you know.
Okay, so that, I was wondering about that. Okay.
This is Wes Dotson.
Yeah.
I could also maybe make the argument that practice insurance could be there too, if you're not carrying insurance more as a in other words, having insurance is one of those required things.
Right,
Or it's
yeah,
not
okay,
required, but I'm thinking of an enforcement, trying to get it to
Gordon
a
Borland,
different
yeah,
group.
you're talking like practice liability, like
Mhm,
liability insurance, general
Yeah.
practice
Well,
insurance.
it just says practice insurance on the
Right,
list.
but I mean, I was,
Yeah.
okay. Is that, I don't know. What do you think?
Enforcement or Dr. Sokolowski? I see a question on your.
Yeah.
Why don't we take each of these and just say which of the three work groups they'll fit under?
Sounds wonderful.
Let's just do that, and then
That's a much
let's
better
have
idea.
another conversation.
Okay, let's do that. So, multiple relationships, what, do we see that under standard of care? Okay. Treatment area and surroundings,
Standard of care.
I think that's standard of care, yeah. Provision of products and services by the behavior analyst.
I think that could go in either.
I
Possibly
think that could be either.
standard of care, or some suggestion it might be under enforcement.
If it's you're trying to sell your own products or pushing a particular.
Yeah, Ms. Gordon Borland, I understand. I think the requirement maybe falls under standard of care. Then overall, if someone falls outside that, that would be one of the issues that would have to be looked at by the enforcement group.
Maybe it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah, I mean,
so.
well, actually, when you get down to it, everything falls under enforcement, because if they're setting as criterion and someone fails to meet it, that falls under enforcement in some way.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Yep. What I was interpreting this was that we're looking at perhaps some clarifying language under
Right, the same standard.
provision, standard, treatment area and surroundings, provision of services and so on. That sounds to me like that's standard of care probably.
Yeah.
I'm open to disagreeing with myself.
I think right now we're just discussing, this is Stephanie Sokolowski, what we see that is. We're not like saying, well, that's too much for them. We're not there yet.
Yeah, agreed. Gordon Borland, so I think authorized representatives of patients, I see that as clearly under standard of care. Documents, electronic documents and signatures. Still sounds like standard of care to me. Hearing no outcry, I guess we'll think of it thus. Scope of practice. This is a major issue.
Yeah.
And this may be an ongoing set of discussions. First of all, I'm not assuming that all this will be addressed in the next time we report back for the next meeting. Is that correct?
You
Mary?
all would all be supermen and superwomen.
Well, we are, yeah.
You are, but that's a lot, and it'll be up to the members of that work group. This is a lot to tackle. We have a lot of standard of care stuff, so you can decide what is you're going to go for first, and it may, as you say, be ongoing.
Okay, yeah, we can, right now, we're just identifying kind of
Yes.
relevant work group, then we can work on sequence and priorities within that.
Within that, when the group meets,
Right.
yes.
Okay. Scope of practice does sound like standard of care. Okay, reporting to and from certifying entities, we had previously delineated that as possibly under the enforcement work group. Practice insurance. There was a suggestion by Dr. Dodson that might fall under enforcement.
This is Dr. Dawson. I think given your clarification that this is probably all standard of care that clarifies those things, I agree that it stays in standard of care. I get the work either way. I'm on both.
Well,
I'm not winning anything with that.
okay, Stephanie Sokolowski, I think it's obvious that the vast majority is under standard of care. So I think in my mind, I think we're probably all going to take components of standard of care to help with, instead of saying, okay, you four drew the short straw.
Well, Dr. Sokolowski, Mary Winston, we can't do that because then we would end up with quorum issues.
Okay.
But this is just going to be a very hard-working group, and they're going to take a little at a time.
Okay.
Gordon Borland, I'd like to be the one-person education group, and not only anything, since we're not doing that one. But just in case, I'm coming.
So funny. You are so funny.
Okay.
Go away.
All right. And related issues, that definitely is enforcement.
I think enforcement can handle that.
Okay, so let me see where we've landed here.
Well,
Okay, that's input here?
What's that?
It sounds like you need to let their staff make the recommendations.
Mary, have we in the past done like two dual work groups to handle discrete issues? It might be a way to.
Oh,
divvy it up.
possibly. My suggestion is for this initial work group to meet and sort of ferret it out with a small group, and that way they can tackle what they're going to tackle, and something possibly could be moved over, not to be discussed with, amongst yourselves. But the initial group that Dr. Borland appointed, Dr. Borland, Dr. Mock, Ms. Snyder, and Dr. Dodson, that's going to be their job to first decide, and then we may expand it. We just want to be very careful of the quorum issues because this is a lot, but it's possible to expand it, but I would just prefer to keep it clean right now and let this work group meet initially.
Stephanie Sokolowski, I've got another question. What if we had standard of care group 1 and standard of care group 2, so they didn't collaborate?
Yeah, that's what I was.
They didn't
saying.
work
Maybe
together.
Each group could handle different issues,
And
so that's what we were.
That's up to Dr. Borland. If you want to assign, we typically don't assign just really specific issues to one, but I didn't know if you wanted to kind of review the information that Laura provided and then make a further assessment, which would mean your work group would have to have an initial meeting and then say, after your review, and make other decisions. Or if you just want to go off the cuff today and say, I want to give multiple relationships to X, Y, and Z.
This is Gordon Borland. I think maybe we should proceed just with the work group as is, and then we can see.
Once we
what
get into the
pleasure-
meat
right,
of it?
Right,
Okay.
because there may be, again, there may be standard of care 1, standard of care 2, or something like that. Certainly, that could be.
And once you get into it, you may think of who you would
Mhm.
want, because it's Dr. Borland's call on each of these. Once you sort of get into your initial meeting and thought process, and after reviewing the information that Laura gave.
So it's Gordon Borland. So we could, in fact, just have another we could designate another work group. Right,
Yes.
we're not limited to
those? No, because you have a lot going on. You have a lot to talk about.
I'm
But-
feeling a general sense that that may happen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but I want you to drive
I would prefer
that.
to look at it and discuss it a little bit more and see where.
And that is definitely your call.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's how we're going to proceed.
And this
At this
will,
point.
this will move us, actually, Mary Winston again, to recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. We've got to get information from these work groups, and that's going to be what we would discuss, one main thing we would discuss in our next meeting. So we don't have dates set aside. A lot of times we do, but because we have so many things on this one agenda item G to meet, we would prefer to talk to staff and get these work groups set up so we actually have something to discuss and work on when we meet. So Delia would contact you via email and get your schedules and try to schedule another work group. After this work group and enforcement work group, at least one of these work groups, has had a chance to meet, so we can actually get some work done.
Okay, Gordon Borland, let me see if I'm understanding where we may be. Item H would be recommendation for agenda items. I think we can very broadly say, of course, the staff reports.
Yes.
The commission report from the commission decision,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Regarding the rules, and then reports from the various work groups, however many that may end up being. Okay, so, I mean, that's probably just a given.
Yes,
Standard,
because
okay.
they would bring forth their discussion, and if they have a recommendation, that recommendation would be brought before the full body, and you would discuss, that recommendation, yea or nay.
And those recommendations, Gordon Borland, the recommendations would not have been shared among the members of the board as a whole, except via the packet we get. Otherwise,
Preparing
we
for
would
the
have
meeting.
a
Yes.
quorum
Yes.
issue, correct?
And we typically have one member of that work group do the main presentation for the whole body.
Okay. Thank you, got that. What is the general sense of, at least roughly, when we should meet again? Because there's some significant deadlines coming up, or significant events targeted. June 15, licensure applications are available and can be issued as of June 15. Would it be beneficial to try to meet again before that? Or, I'm just not sure process here. Once the rules are, assuming the rules are approved by the commission, let me state my premise here, then, of course, the whole licensure thing just goes from there.
Yes.
If I understand.
You've done the heavy lifting for that to go forward. The commission will now have the set of rules that you all are recommending. The June 15th will come. License issuance is available. We can handle that. The rules and standard of care are always going to be looked at. We need to establish a good body for that. We don't have to have everything done by June 15th. We have to have the licenses ready to issue.
Yeah.
We have to have the set of rules in place, the first set. We've got that moving forward. Standard of care, we don't have to tackle all of these issues in agenda item G before June 15th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gordon Borland, thank you. That's what I wanted to be sure we were not somehow leaving something dangling that was necessary to have been resolved. Okay, so that's good.
This is Wes Dodson. What about the enforcement work group, though, and things like the penalty matrix? Does that have to be in place by June 15th?
Even if it's not specifically in place, some places don't even have one. For uniformity, we like an enforcement matrix, a penalty matrix. That may occur, that meeting may occur, that work group. But we're not anticipating, if something catastrophic happened and some sort of awful complaint came aboard, we could handle that just based on our Chapter 51, Chapter 55. We have stuff in place to do that. Being more specific, we don't have to rush to do that just because we're issuing a license, unless there's some bad actor out there that you all are giving us a nod to, that by June 15th, we would already be revoking a license that we just issued. We have time to do that. This is one that typically moves first, enforcement, because they have a great method of getting this in place. But the licenses can issue without the penalty matrix being there. We've already been given the authority to set a penalty, if necessary. Oh, I'm sorry, and our general counsel just told me that the criminal conviction guidelines also have to be addressed. But licenses can be issued without this specific task being done. Doesn't mean that we can't, if there's a bad actor, doesn't mean that we can't deal with that bad actor.
No, I was mostly concerned really with the criminal conviction piece of just making sure people are applying for licenses initially, that we've set the standard for what we expected. But
yes,
it sounds like that can happen and then catch up.
Yes.
Gordon Borland, other comments, questions regarding this? So I'm, with respect to my question, is it really important that this board meet again before license begin being issued? It sounds like that not critical. Am I interpreting correctly?
That is not critical for the license to issue.
Is it advisable?
Not required, not expected to make you guys do that much in between. And staff has several other programs they're working with. Now, I've been communicating with enforcement while I've been sitting here in Europe, and they know what they have to do, but I would prefer just to confer with staff a little bit more and let Delia reach out to you and see if a date around June 15th or something around that time. So we are just moving along in conjunction with. One doesn't have to happen for another to happen. We're just going to keep moving as licenses are issued. We're going to keep doing things behind the scenes.
Gordon Borland, okay, thank you. So it sounds like it's definitely not necessary that we meet before June 15th.
Right, not necessary.
Advisable, who knows? I know we don't want things to linger.
Right, and it won't linger because we will get these licenses issued first. That's on a good roll. We know we've got that going. As far as criminal conviction guidelines, that's going to be one of the first meetings that the work groups that Standard of Care has a barrage of things that they have to get to. But, okay, I'm getting messages while I'm talking to you, I'm sorry. But criminal conviction guidelines, these things will be going on. License will be issued over here. We'll have meetings over there. But we don't have to tie that to the issuance of the license. I don't want you to get, hung up on that. We want to talk to staff to make sure that we can get something scheduled and we can start the process. Standard of Care, it's a lot of stuff to do. That's definitely going to be ongoing.
Anything else from any of the board members on this? I think where we are is that we are not going to set the date and time of the next meeting, other than we'll be in communication with staff from the department, and obviously we don't want it to go too long, but it may not occur before June 15th.
Delia will poll the board about the next date, and staff from enforcement will contact the members of the enforcement work group about the work group. Standard of Care, some staff will contact the members of that work group, so it's all going to be going on at the same time. But we don't have to rush a meeting right now. And we'll see how it falls out. We just didn't want to set a date right now. You have an opportunity to be heard again. We're starting strategic planning for whoever's out there and wants to contribute to it. So a lot of things going on in the background, and we'll contact you and definitely give you plenty of time to hopefully be available for the next meeting, but we don't have to set that today.
Okay, Gordon Borland, is everyone comfortable, or as comfortable as you care to be, anyway, or need to be?
I'm sorry.
Or need to be anyway?
I'm also getting, and I appreciate this whole Skype business going on. Love technology. I did mention Chapter 53. Just got an instant message from enforcement that even if that's not in place, we have Chapter 53 for our agency, and we can deny a license without the criminal conviction guidelines, if need be. We have the authority. We just like to specify it by rule, but we're covered with that. So no one sneaking into your profession that shouldn't be there. We already have that in place.
Mrs. Gordon-Borland, okay, that's my concern. I would be very concerned if there were some weasel room where someone could sneak in and by being an early responder and not be subject to the rigorous, whatever rigorous review there needs to be, because that's would not be protecting the public,
Right.
and which is the whole point
We're
of
statutorily covered.
this whole licensure.
So the law covers that, and we will make rules to just cover our internal practice on how to enact the law, but that's in place.
Okay, Gordon Borland, thank you. Okay, that's a very important piece, because that leaves me less apprehensive.
Yes.
Other comments? Okay, so we will, at a later date, then review set the time, date for location of the next board meeting. Is there any other business that we need to address here? Otherwise, we are frighteningly close to adjourning.
And I want to add, if anyone comes up with an agenda item between, when you walk out the door or whenever, contact advisory.boards and we can get that item on the agenda for you. So it doesn't just stop here. If there's a concern that comes up and, hey, this has been, told to me or whatever, and I was wondering, could we discuss? And we'll discuss with you how we can handle that agenda item. If that's something that the board has the purview to handle, or what we can do and get it on the agenda to discuss it. So it's not just cut off just because we've just given some tentative things for the agenda. There can be more. Just let us know.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pfefferly, for working through all that. Yeah. So I'd certainly like to thank the members and the staff for being here, and for others attending. Before we adjourn, I'd like to take a moment to express, I think, our collective and individual sorrow and sympathy to the citizens of Austin, who in the last 2 weeks have experienced multiple senseless, horrific bomb explosions. Such tragic loss of life, of friends, family, colleagues, as well as injuries of others, is antithetical to our basic American values and is contrary to the types of behavior that behavior analysts seek to foster and support. This is truly sad, and we feel bad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much.
That being said, it's 12:09, 12:10, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.